come, that my hairs will stand upon end, upon singing the names of Gauranga? When will my eyes overflow with tears, as I chant the holy names of Hari Hari? And when will the moon of Nityanandaprabhu bestow his mercy upon me? When will my material desires become small and insignificant?
When will I renounce material enjoyment and my mind will become purified? When will I see the Chinmaya Swarup of Vrindavan?
When will I eagerly follow the path of Sri Rupa Goswami and Sri Raghunath Das Goswami? By their instructions, I will be able to understand the divine love of Sri Radha and Krishna.
My only aspiration is to attain the lotus feet of Sri Rupa Goswami and Sri Raghunath Das Goswami. This is Naratatama Das's constant prayer. 77. Radha Kunda Sata Kunja Kizira Kumada Bhavata Yamunati Radha Kunda Kunja Going downhill, the banks of the Jamuna.
Because of the Sarova, Kananga, the daughter of the Kalinga mountain, with the extensive waves.
Ansila, Gokul, dear Samira, the trees, creepers, and groves of Vrindavan.
The different varieties of colorful birds, deer, the cool and fragrant breezes from the Malaya mountains. The peacocks, bumblebees, the pastimes with the flute.
The flute itself, the buffalo horn, the bugle, the footsteps of the crowd near down, the banks of the black cloud, springtime, the moon, cold star, and the character light.
I know all these elements are very conductive for Sri Radha and Krishna's loving exchanges, and thus I consider them as Udipaka stimuli for the devotee's entrance into their Leela Vilasa.
I refuse to go anywhere if these Udipaka are not there. For to abandon all these is to give up life itself.
Bhaktivinoda says, hear me, O Kana, your Udipakas will stimulate remembrance of you, and my very life and soul.
Okay, if you can turn to page 54, please. Can we read the translation on there?
Who will go, brothers? Who will cross over this ocean of material suffering? This Kali Yuga in which Sri Chaitanya Avatar has appeared is blessed. Chaitanya Avatar does not come in every Kali Yuga.
At the bathing place of my Gauranga, a free ferry boat is waiting. There is no restriction. Everyone is coming, including the lame, blind, and distressed. All are climbing aboard to cross over.
Harinam is the boat, Sri Guru is the helper, the Sankirtan parting, moving with upraised arms are the oars.
Also, souls can cross over with the favourable winds of fame. Only Gochandas is so unfortunate that due to his own fault seems to slip and
Okay, we're going to have Archie now.
Oh, nice. Great.
Very juicy.
Shiva Jaya, Jaya, Shiva Jaya.
Shri Radha Bihari Ki Jai. Nityalila Pravishtam Vishnu Pai Sarvatra Sati Shri Srimad Shri Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnu Pai Paramahansa Paripradikacharya Stodra Sati Shri Srimad Shri Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Nityalila Pravishtam Vishnu Pai Stodra Sati Shri Srimad Shri Bhakti Vedanta Shri Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Mahabhagavad Shri Gokishore Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Sachidananda Shri Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai. Vaishnava Sarvabhauma Shri Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Rupananda Guru Varga Ki Jai. Shri Gauri Vedanta Charya Shri Baladev Vibhushan Prabhu Ki Jai. Shri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur Ki Jai. Shri Narottam Srinivasa Ananda Prabhu Chai Ki Jai. Shri Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Shri Rup Sanatan Bhakti Vedana Shri Deva Gopala Bhakti Das Vedana Sad Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Namaskar Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Shri Ramadai Ramananda Shri Gopal Shri Ki Jai. Prem se Gaur Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Antadeep, Mayapur, Samantadeep, Gauradeep, Madhadeep, Kaladeep, Rudadeep, Janadeep, Murajumadeep, Rudadeep, Amika, Shri Navadeep, Dhama Ki Jai. Shri Shri Rai Krishna Gopa Gopi Go Gaurajan Dwara Savanamika Shri Braj Mandala Dhama Ki Jai. Radha Subhavana Ki Jai. Shri Shamkunda Radha Kunda Tulsi Bhakti Jamana Ganga Devi Ki Jai. Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Sudarshan Prabhu Ki Jai. Bhakta Pravara Shri Prahlad Maharaj Ki Jai. Bhakti Vidyam Vinasana Kari Shrina Shrina Bhagavan Ki Jai. Charodam Charo Sampradaya Charo Chari Ki Jai. Akaramat Raj Shri Chaitanya Mat Ki Jai. Murani Sakam Samur Ki Jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Bhagavata Bhakti Vindi Ki Jai. Go Premanandi. Om Adyanam Tindarandasya Jnanam Shalakaya Shastram Vidhanaya Tasmai Shri Gurave Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Judaya Krishnaya Krishnabhaktaya Tadabhaktaya Yam Pravajantam Anupetam Apeta Krityam Vaipayano Viraha Karuhasuha Putri Shrisanmaya Saya Karavo Vanderush Tam Sarvabhutadaya Munimanatosmi Atya Vinaya Paradhanashani Shirtasya Kamani Tarangamani Kripamani Svam Sharanam Prapanam Vrinde Namaste Sharanarvindam Tavaivasmi Tavaivasmi Najivami Sambhina Iti Vikyaya Radhe Tam Nayamam Sharanam. First I offer my unlimited obeisances in the dust of the lotus feet of my most worshipable Diksha Gurudev, Nityalila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Astotara Satashri Srimad Srila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada, and the same unlimited obeisances in the dust of the lotus feet of my most worshipable Shiksha Gurudev, Om Vishnupad Astotara Satashri Srimad Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj, to all of our disciplic succession and all the assembled devotees. So, as tonight has been billed, means the billing of the night, is that I'll try to share one atom of the experiences that I had with Srila Prabhupada in the 60s and 70s. I received about 90 letters from him, and I also spoke with him hundreds of times but of that, I only remember a little bit, and I'm only can share in this short time a little bit of that little bit. I met Srila Prabhupada in 1966 in Tompkins Square Park in New York City, where he would go every Sunday and chant by a certain tree. He would bring his Indian rug from his quarters, which was behind the courtyard of his first temple in America at 26 2nd Avenue. So they would roll out the rug in the park, and he would sit on the rug, and the devotees would dance in front of him in a circle, chanting Hare Krishna. And I thought that the moment I saw it, I'd never heard of Krishna before, but I thought, oh, this seems like it came from another planet. And then years later, I heard Prabhupada corroborating that thought, because he was explaining the Hare Krishna mantra, that because it comes from the depths of the soul. But now we have amnesia since the beginning of time, and we've forgotten Krishna. So when we hear the chanting, then subconsciously or consciously, we think, oh, that sound, it is coming again. Like somebody who has amnesia is brought to his house, old house, and all of a sudden, which he couldn't remember for years, he remembers, oh, I used to sleep there, oh, I used to eat there. So everything comes back. So Krishna consciousness, pure love for Krishna, is dormant in everyone's heart, and the chanting brings it out. So that was my first impression when I met Prabhupada. Then after he made his announcements, after the chanting, he made his announcements, inviting everybody to go home and take the chanting home with them, become free from anxieties and peaceful. And then he rolled up the rug, his disciples rolled up the rug and went back to the temple at 26 2nd Avenue, which was about an 8-block walk from the park. So I'd never heard of the temple, I'd never heard of Hare Krishna, but somebody asked me if I'd like to go there, so I thought, why not? So we walked there, and as soon as we came into the temple, somebody gave me a chapati, and then I was overhearing 2 brahmacharis speaking, and one of them said to the other, at that time they called Prabhupada Swamiji, and they said, one of them was saying to the other, oh, Swamiji just said that whenever we have arguments with each other, we should take it like clouds passing by, because when clouds pass by, you don't even notice it. So the arguments should be that insignificant. And then somebody took me up to his quarters behind the courtyard, and there he was telling the few guests that were present, this process is nothing that we've made up. This process is very old, very simple, and sublime. And then he invited me to come to his programs. He was giving classes in the morning and in the evening. And he said, do you live near here? And at that time, I was one of those LSD hippies, so I thought I was all pervading like God. So I said, oh, I live very near. But actually, I lived an hour and a half away. So he said, oh, that's very good, and you can come in the mornings. So by the power, the pure devotee is Satya Sankalpa. What he says happens. So by his saying that, even though I didn't know him, I felt obliged to travel every morning for an hour and a half, and then go back every evening for an hour and a half. And Prabhupada was speaking about Bhagavad Gita in the evenings, and just 1 month after I started coming in October of 1966, and in November he began his talks on the Chaitanya Charitamrita, and he particularly began from Sanatan Shiksha, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings to Srila Sanatana Goswami in the Madhya Lila, chapters 20 to 23. So, even though we were all just a bunch of drugged out hippies, and in fact,
most of the new members who were sitting there in the temple, which was about, I'd say it was about as long as this room, but about 3/4 as wide. So half the people were sitting with like these woolen blankets over their heads, like teepees, and the other half of the people were just looking at everybody else in the room and getting distracted. But still, Prabhupada was giving such beautiful knowledge. He was explaining how Mahaprabhu was telling Srila Sanatana Goswami that Krishna takes birth in a particular universe. And then, because there are innumerable universes, which was shocking for us to begin with, because we just thought there was one universe with 9 planets in it, as we had learned from school. But Prabhupada is saying there are innumerable universes. So Krishna appears and he takes birth in one particular universe in 1 second. And the next second, he takes birth in the second universe, which is the first second for the second universe and the second second for the first universe. And then in the third second, actually he said Kana, which is smaller than a second. In the third second, he takes birth in the third universe, which is the second in the second universe and the third second in the first universe. And so Krishna stayed in this material world for 125 years. As you know, he was about 90 when he spoke the Bhagavad Gita, though he looked like a fresh youth of 14. So if you consider, Prabhupada is telling us, and even though we were so, unconscious, he was telling us all this exalted information, because it was purifying, hearing the Shabda Brahman, the sound vibration from the pure devotee, and the praying atoms emanating from the pores of the pure devotee, and the pure love emanating from his glands. He was purifying us in all ways. So he said, if you consider that Krishna stayed in the world for 125 years, and if you multiply that with how many seconds there are in 125 years, that's how many universes Krishna is in at the same time. And the same thing with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's also on his roadshow. And Prabhupada would tell us about the Lord's roadshow. He said, just like if you're at a horse race and the horses are passing by and they keep going around the track, but you only see them a little bit. So Krishna has a roadshow like that. And I was initiated about 1 month after I met him. And I wasn't at all chanting 16 rounds. And when he initiated me, he said, your name is Radharani. That's the great-great-grandmother of Krishna, the original queen of the Jadu dynasty in which Krishna appeared. Krishna appears just like the sun. That is, the sun doesn't start at any time. The sun is permanent. And it just appears and disappears. So Krishna is like that also. And when he would give the fire sacrifices and our initiation, he would give a very long talk about the powers of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, and how the perfectional stage of chanting is that you experience all these ecstatic symptoms, and if the ecstatic symptoms aren't coming, like hair standing on end, weeping, horripilation, then it means there are offenses, and he would go through the 10 offenses, and then he would personally put the neck beads on. And I was so out of it and so new that I didn't even know his pranam mantra when I got initiated. So I got initiated with one other devotee, Rupanuga Prabhu. And so when Prabhupada told me to bow down, I didn't know the mantra. So he said, Nama, I said Nama, he said, oh. So he was so encouraging. And in the last couple of nights I was showing slideshows, and I was showing the earliest painting that I did for Prabhupada that he ordered me to do of Lord Vishnu in the causal ocean. And for those who didn't see the slideshow, I'll tell you what it looked like. It was just a copy. I didn't even make it up, but I couldn't even copyright. And the Lord's hands looked like baseball gloves, and his club looked like an ice cream cone. And the waves in the causal ocean looked like question marks on a psychedelic blue background. And when I finished the painting, I presented it to Prabhupada in his quarters. And just like with Gurudev, wherever he is, you know, there's a metal to the magnet. All the devotees are right there. So of course with Prabhupada it was like that. And so he made an announcement to all the devotees, pointing to the painting, and he said, excuse me, now who could look at that and say that is not God? So just like a parent encourages their little baby children, so Prabhupada was encouraging me in that way. And then, at first I was painting in the temple room, the 26 2nd Avenue temple room. And then, after a very short time, a month or so, Prabhupada invited me to come and paint in his quarters. And so I had so many experiences with him there. He had his room that he was dictating Bhagavad Gita, dictating teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and dictating letters also. And then there was a window between his room and the room that he invited me to paint in. And the same room that I was painting in, Prabhupada would make offerings. Perhaps you saw that very old movie where he has these two big bells, and one bell is here and one bell is here, and he's kind of ringing them both together. And that's where he made the offerings, the Bhoga offerings. And then the prasadam would be, he would put it in a simulated wooden little bowl, cut the apple up and kind of like toss the pits and things. They would just fly, I don't know where. And then he would bring it down and put it on the side altar for distribution after the second kirtan. So I had a lot of experiences with Prabhupada in his quarters. Like for example, he told me to paint just the Radha and Krishna part of the cover of the first canto Srimad Bhagavatam that a friend of his had painted, and Prabhupada was going to make that the big painting for his temple. So while I was painting, Prabhupada would come and sit behind me sometimes and tell me that the hand should be red, and this should be that way, that should be that way. I didn't even know what a garland was. I just kind of painted the garland like it's like a pipe. I didn't know what a garland was. So Prabhupada was really starting us from nowhere, but so encouraging. He would squat down in that Indian way that's like half sitting and give so many instructions. Probably because I was spaced out and not concentrating and kind of looking here and looking there. Just like Krishna took the bright side with Putana, so Prabhupada also took the bright side with us. And so as he saw me spacing out and painting, he said that any intelligent or creative person has to think more than they actually do. Like a judge has to think for a long time before they make their judgment, innocent or guilty. And then he told me about the writer, Srila Jayadev Goswami. And later on, about, let's see, that was 1967, 77, 87. Down to Narayan Goswami Maharaj, my Shiksha Guru, which stemmed from the same story. So Prabhupada was planting the seed of this painting at that time. He told me, when he saw me kind of wandering, he said that Jayadev Goswami was writing about the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. And the line came to him that Krishna bowed down. He put his head at the feet of Srimati Radhika and begged her to put her lotus feet on his head. So when this line came to him, he couldn't write it. He was trembling because he was thinking that Radharani is the devotee of Krishna. How could Krishna put his head at anyone else's feet and ask them to put their feet on his head? So he couldn't write it. So he told his wife, Padmavati, that I'm going to take bath in the river and I have to think about this. So he left, and then she saw him come back and go to his book and write something in it and then leave. And then she saw him come back and he said, I still can't think of it. She said, what do you mean you can't think of it? And how is it that you came back so quickly? Your hair is wet now from bathing, and the bathing river is so far away. How is it that you came back so quick? He said, I didn't come back so quick. I left a long time ago. So she said, but no, you came and you wrote something in your book. So he said, let me see that book. So he looked in his book and he saw that that line that he couldn't write was written in there. And so he began to weep, and he told his wife, oh, Krishna himself has come in my form to write this line. So you're so fortunate. And both of them wept and fainted in ecstasy. So Prabhupada took the bright side. A couple of years later, in 1970 or so, when we were in the Boston Temple, he was expressing the same thing, that we should all be like that. I had showed him my painting of Bhishma Dev lying on the bed of arrows for his first canto, Srimad Bhagavatam. And Prabhupada was just like a father praises his little kid who brought the report card home or something. He said, oh, in the beginning she was painting alone, and now there are so many assistants, like I was some big shot. And then he said, then he explained indirectly what he was actually doing. He said there was about 50 devotees in the room from many, many different temples all over America. And he said, if the spark is there, the slightest spark, you should fan that. So if you see that anybody has the slightest inclination towards Krishna consciousness, try and develop that selflessly. And then he told the story of one thief who was passing by a Bhagavatam class in Vrindavan, all over the villages, that there's so many Bhagavatam teachers. And the teacher was saying that Krishna's mother would decorate him in beautiful garments and ornaments and send him out for herding the cows during the day. So the thief had some pious, spiritual pious credits on the background from previous lives, which made him believe that there is such a person as Krishna who goes out cow herding and wearing beautiful garments and ornaments. But because of his past sinful activities, he thought, yeah, I should go and get some of those ornaments. So he started going around Vrindavan forest looking for Krishna. And then because he was sincerely looking, Krishna came to him. And so he said to Krishna, oh, he's trying to flatter him, oh, you're such a nice little boy. Why don't you let me see those ornaments? And Krishna said, no, Mother Yasoda wouldn't allow it, I can't. Oh, yes, it's all right. So just by talking back and forth with Krishna, getting Krishna's association, he surrendered and became a great devotee. So Prabhupada was encouraging us to encourage others when the slightest spark is there. And I think many of you are old ISKCON devotees, so you've therefore heard the expression ISKCON bullets, which are actually glubjamins. And for those of you who are new, they're very tasty sweets made with sugar water and what else? Milk products and sugar water. It's very juicy. So Prabhupada had a big barrel of those glubjamins, and sometimes while I was painting, he would feed me, not in my mouth, but he would give me glubjamins, just like, again, parents encouraging their little babies. And then Prabhupada went to San Francisco to open his second ISKCON temple. And then most of us were left back in the New York temple. So Prabhupada wrote me a letter in which he said, again, so encouraging, I can tell you are devoted because I've seen that while you're painting, you're chanting Hare Krishna. Always make Krishna your husband. Mundane husbands and wives can never really get along in the most wonderful way because the platform of the relationship is false. That is this body, which is false. So just make Krishna your husband and engage in the service of your husband 24 hours and see how happy you'll become. So we can see how Prabhupada was setting the perfect example to encourage newborn babies. And he would always answer questions in very deep, but at the same time, very simple ways. Somebody once asked him, why is this world here? So Prabhupada answered, because God is there, therefore His energy is there. And this world is one of His energies, the material energy. Everything has to be there. And then the person said, well, how could you answer questions with so much depth, but at the same time so simply? So how is it that you can do that? He said, because it's simple. God is great, you are not great, so you should surrender to God. And one other encouragement, and at the same time instruction to all the devotees, sometimes he would call me up to his quarters before he had asked me to stay there. Or even when I was staying there, when I was down in the temple room, he would call me up to his quarters and sometimes give me pictures to copy. So he gave me the Panchatattva, where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is on top and then the other four associates. And he told me to paint that. And then when I was almost finished with it, he told me to paint the Hare Krishna mantra at the bottom because there was some room, because there was tiled floors that they were dancing on. So he said, paint the Hare Krishna mantra on the bottom. But then, when the picture was just about to be finished, and I was just about to paint the mantra, he said, no, I changed my mind. Don't paint the mantra, because although Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself, he's in the form of a devotee, so he wouldn't want to put his feet on the above the mantra. So he was teaching, through teaching art, he was teaching so much etiquette at the same time. Once he told me that I had a dream that we were having kirtan in Tompkins Square Park, and there were about 5,000 people there. And then, very shortly after that, his dream came true, and that there was going to be a very big festival, and we were going to be able to chant on the stage. So he asked me to paint a very big Hare Krishna mantra sign, so that all the people could see it. So in those days we didn't have easels, so when I would do a painting, it would be against the wall and on the floor, which reminds me that that's how I would leave the paintings at night, on the floor and against the wall, and I would sit on the floor and paint. So then when I came back the next morning, one morning, to his quarters, the painting had a pillow under it, because he was showing me how to respect the picture is not different from Krishna himself. So anyway, when I was making this sign, it was on oak tag paper, so it's not stiff. So I was doing it on the floor, and I had to kind of sprawl over the names, kind of lie down over the names to do the final touches on the top line. I was on the bottom, and I had to kind of lean over it. So as I was doing that, I was working in Prabhupada's quarters. So he walked in, and I saw some beautiful feet there, and looked up, and there was Prabhupada looking down. And I told him that I feel offensive that I'm lying down on Krishna. Krishna's name is not different from Krishna. So he said, no, you are in Krishna's service, it is all right. And then he told the story of the gopis who did a service, not like that because I'm a conditioned soul, but he told the story that Krishna had a headache, and Krishna told Narada that Krishna was in Dwarka, and he told Narada that the only way that my headache can be relieved is if I have the dust of the lotus feet of any of my devotees. So Narada went to the queens and to other associates in Dwarka, and nobody would give the dust of their feet because they said that Krishna is God. How can I do that? I'll go to hell. He went to yogis, he went everywhere, and nobody would give the dust. So as soon as he went to Vrindavan, the gopis said, oh yes, take as much dust as you can. And they would, after giving the dust of their feet, they would get more dust, put their feet somewhere else and get more. So Narada Muni said, aren't you afraid of going to hell? So the gopis said, never mind, I shall go to hell, but just let Krishna be cured. He said, this is devotion. So he was saying that because you're doing it in Krishna's service, for his pleasure or the pleasure of his guru, the guru, then it's okay. One time in Boston, my god sister and I asked Prabhupada that since the living entity, you say that the living entity does not fall from Goloka Vrindavan or from Vaikuntha, so how is it that we use the word forget? We say we forget. How can you forget something that you never knew? And how would you later on remember? So he said, because it's your nature to forget. That is the difference between Jiva and Shiva. Shiva meaning the all-auspicious Lord. You always forget, and he never forgets. So you forget, and Srimad Bhagavatam reminds you. Then you forget again, and Srimad Bhagavatam reminds you again. And gradually, you stop forgetting. This is an inconceivable subject, so he gave a simple answer in that way. Then another time when he was visiting Boston, this is 1968, and we got him an apartment just across the street of the Glenville Avenue storefront temple, which was just a little bit bigger than the first temple at 26 Second Avenue. So we were all working very hard when Prabhupada was coming, painting the walls blue and the, what do you call those bottom things? The borders, golden. And then when he came in, he said, he saw everybody cleaning, and he said, clean temple, clean mind. When you clean Krishna's temple, your heart becomes cleansed. And then he saw how the devotees had cleaned out the closet. The apartment belonged to just some young hippie student who went to Boston University, but then she was subletting the apartment for that month so that Prabhupada could be there. So Prabhupada was pointing to the little closet just adjacent to his room where he would bring deities with him, his own Radha and Krishna deities. He said, this closet used to be a rubbish hell, and now it is Vaikuntha. And then he saw that our backs was to the deities, looking at him and back to the deities, so he told us, so always in practical ways teaching us the proper etiquettes. And we got so many letters from him in relation to the paintings, because especially for the Chaitanya Charitamrita rush, he wanted us to do 17 volumes of books in 2 months. And he was traveling, and there was no email in those days. We didn't really have computers. It was kind of like composing machines, which is like halfway between a typewriter and a computer. So all the communication with Prabhupada was done by snail mail. So he was in Los Angeles, and he told us, all the editors and typists and artists, that we had to produce 17 volumes of books, that is 15 volumes of Chaitanya Charitamrita, because 2 were already done, and 2 volumes of the 5th canto Srimad Bhagavatam. And then he left, and he was traveling in different countries, including India. So we had to get so many answers from him so quickly because, as I mentioned, we didn't know anything about anything. So, for example, we had to paint for the Krishna book. This wasn't during the marathon time, but in 1969. The marathon time was in 75. But in 1969, when Prabhupada first ordered the ISKCON press workers and the artists and the binders and everybody to produce so many books, every month there should be a book coming out. And the artist, he ordered that every 2 days a new painting should come out. So there were 3 of us on the assembly line to make a picture. Bhardraj would start it, he would work for 2 days, making the composition and then doing the first layer, and then I would do the second layer, and Murlidhar would put in the fine details. So we had to ask him so many questions about what everything looked like. For example, chapter 90 of the Krishna book is the personified Vedas. The Vedas, as you know, are scriptures full of wisdom about Krishna, about all of his incarnations, about evolution of society through Varnashram, heavenly planets, everything is there. So the personified Vedas are offering prayers to the Lord in his form as Mahavishnu or Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, I forgot. So we had to ask Prabhupada, what does the personified Vedas look like? And from coming out of the world of television commercials, I thought, well, maybe there are books with hands and legs coming out. So we wrote that to Prabhupada. Fortunately, we had that much intelligence to do that. So Prabhupada wrote back, no, they're not like that. The personified Vedas are all great sages. Some of them look like Vyasadeva with long beards. Some of them look like Narada. Some of them look like clean-shaven brahmacharis. So you should paint them like that. And also, perhaps, I think all of you have seen the paintings that we did of the, whenever we would show the super soul, Krishna in the heart of the living entity, along with the soul. The soul would always look like a sparkling star. So that's because that's how Prabhupada told us how to paint it. But that's not what we really look like in the spiritual world. That's just like you see a seed of a tree, but that's not what the tree looks like. So in the conditioned stage, before the body is developed, the soul can be represented as a sparkling star. But the pure devotee, the self-realized soul, the bona fide guru, he could look at the seed, that sparkling star. He could look through anybody's body, mind, intelligence, and see that seed of the soul inside. And then just like an expert gardener can look at the seed of any plant and tell what plant that's going to be and how the fruits and flowers are going to be growing. And simultaneously, he can water. He knows how to water and what kind of sunlight to give that plant as it's growing. So the pure devotee can look at anybody's body and see right through the body, through the soul, to the soul, and tell what kind of services that soul has in its constitutional position in its service to Radha and Krishna. And plus, not only his disciples, but every living entity he can do that with. Plus, he knows how to nourish that soul so that their service and their spiritual bodies will come to maturity. Sometimes Prabhupada would pose for the paintings, and one very memorable experience is when he posed for the painting of Lord Nrsingadev back in 1967. He brought me over to his wall in his apartment behind the 26 Second Avenue Temple, and he showed me the Leela avatars, the 10 pastime incarnations, Das avatars, with Vishnu in the causal ocean in the middle. And one of the pictures over there, which was only about 2 inches, was Lord Nrsingadev, but I could hardly see anything clearly in 2 inches. He had so many arms, and he was ripping apart Hiranyakashipu. So Prabhupada told me to do a big painting of that, and he said, I want this painting for all of my temples. So I didn't know how to begin, so Srila Prabhupada himself posed for Lord Nrsingadev. And he went like this, and because the Lord is in his heart, you can practically see the long nails coming from his fingers. He said the prayer. And when the pure devotee says a prayer, that because the prayers are non-different from the personality who he's praying to, that personality manifested. You practically see everything. So Prabhupada prayed the English of our Nrsingadev prayer. O my Lord, in your lotus hands you have long lotus nails with which you ripped apart the wasp-like demon Hiranyakashipu. And Prabhupada also crossed his eyes. And those of you who have crossed your eyes, you know that hurts. So in those days we didn't have cameras. I mean, I didn't use cameras to copy photos of the devotees as I did later on. So I said to Prabhupada so that I could capture it, oh, could you do that again? And he immediately crossed his eyes again and took the whole pose. And then the first president of the first New York ISKCON temple, that was Brahmananda, and the first temple treasurer, Gargamuni, they were material brothers as well. So Prabhupada sat down in one chair, like a director's chair, and he had one of them sit down on another chair and put the other one over the other one's lap and had them pose for me for the painting. Then when the painting was almost done, he said, why so little blood? You should make blood everywhere. Because if God is not ferocious, then where does ferocity come from? So just before the painting was done, I saw in that little picture that I was copying that Lord Nrsingadev, who was sitting on the Shesha, the couch of Shesha, the Ananta Shesh. Shesh was on a Indian-looking rug, and the details in that little picture weren't big enough. So I went into Prabhupada's room because I remembered that he had a picture of Sita, Ram, Hanuman, and Lakshman on his wall, just beside his bed. And bed means that there were just a few mats on the floor, and in front of him was the trunk that he had brought from India with his Srimad Bhagavatam, just a little footlocker trunk. And he used that trunk as his desk. And then he was sitting on a few mats, and those mats were second-hand mats from the devotees, and I had given him one. He was so humble that he used them. And then, so here he was sitting on his mat, and there was the trunk. And then right here on the wall, there was a picture of Sita Ram, and there was it was bigger than the small one that I had, and it had the Indian rug on it. So I didn't want to step on his mat, so I was kind of standing in front of his mat and jumping up to see the picture on the wall. It was like, no brains. So Prabhupada said, what are you doing? So I said, well, I'm trying to see the picture on your walls. I was only 20. That's my excuse. So I said, I'm trying to see the picture on your wall, but I don't want to step on your bed. So Prabhupada said, in Krishna's service, you can step on my head. So he was always, by his own activities, he was always setting the perfect example of how to relate with others. And as I mentioned, I got so many letters from him describing the paintings. When we were painting the first canto Srimad Bhagavatam, the 88 sages of Naimisharanya were questioning Sutta Goswami. Oh, please tell us, you who are blessed with many years, please tell us what is the essence of all scriptures so that our souls can become happy. By hearing them, our souls can become happy. So I asked Prabhupada, since Sutta Goswami was an old man, should I paint him with long hair and a top knot and a beard like one of the sages? So Prabhupada said, no, he was not an old man. He was a young man. Blessed with many years means that many years of knowledge. So that showed that even if something's in the book, you still need the living guru to tell you what's in his own book, to explain it if it's not clear. And in the beginning, he let it go that I was painting Krishna with very kind of like wild hair. And then he let that go for a couple of years. And then he started writing letters that, because I did a painting of the Rasa dance, because it says right in the book that Krishna looked like he was being embraced by the goddess of fortune because his hair was so long and flying, and the gopis' hair were all disheveled and flying, and their clothing was all disheveled. So that's how I painted it, because that's how I read it. And then when Prabhupada saw that, he said, this painting should be ripped out of every book. It ruined my book. Because he said, you made it look like a hippie plaything. So we really need the living person. And there's lots more remembrances that I can do, but I'd like to turn to another aspect of Srila Prabhupada. That is, who is Srila Prabhupada really? In 1966, when I first joined, Prabhupada had already given the devotees his first pranam mantra. That is, Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namani. Then, in 1968, he gave us the second pranam mantra, Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaura Vani Pacharani Neva Shesha Shunyavadi Prastita Deshikarani. It's generally the disciple who writes the mantra, but we didn't know anything about anything. So Prabhupada himself had to give us his own mantra. So then, that was 1968. So in 1997 or 8, when Syamarani Maharaj was traveling on his world tour, maybe it was even 2000, he was in Alachua, and he asked us all, what is the meaning of Gaura Vani, Pacharani? And he called on some of the senior disciples of Prabhupada, and they could only answer, it means chant Hare Krishna, it means, none of us could really get it, though we've been saying it for so many years. I didn't even know what Gaura Vani Pacharani meant. I know Pacharani meant preaching, and I know it meant preaching the,
Like Hare Krishna mantra preaching.
Well, let's see, what's the translation? I offer my obeisances to the disciple of Srila Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, who is traveling around the Western world, destroying the impersonalism and voidism. Does it say anything else? You can check. I don't remember anything else from it. So what is this Gaura Vani? Nirvishesha Shunyavadi. That's all? So that's how we learned it. That's the translation that Prabhupada gave. So we couldn't really answer. So that was the first class that I heard Srila Narayan Maharaj, Srila Gurudev, speaking about Prabhupada's, the deep essence of Srila Prabhupada's pranam mantra. And then after that I heard about 10 more classes about it. So I'd like to share that with you. What is this Gaura Vani? Gaura Vani means the Vani, or the words, the message that came from the lotus lips of Gaur, Sri Gauranga, or Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. What his teaching was to the world. Okay, that's part of it. But what is his teaching to the world? And then he quoted one verse that Prabhupada had quoted so often, but I never gave the verse really a second thought. Because the Shiksha Guru, if the Guru leaves, Diksha Guru leaves the world before the disciple completes his course in Krishna consciousness, and he needs more training, he hasn't become a pure devotee yet, then it's incumbent upon the disciple to find someone who's like that Diksha Guru who acts as a Shiksha Guru and continues with the training exactly how the Diksha Guru would have continued it. So, my Shiksha Guru, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayana Goswami Maharaj, the reason that I'm following him is because I always find, from day one that I met him till now, that he's always putting a spotlight on Srila Prabhupada and Srila Prabhupada's books, so that the whole thing becomes like if you're in the dark and you're trying to read something, and then somebody puts a light on it, and then you can see it so much better. So, he quoted that same verse that made me understand more who is our Srila Prabhupada. He quoted, Arajyo Bhagavan Brajesha Tanayas Taddama Vrindavanam Ramya Karchidupasanam Vrajabadu Vargena Jakaltita Srimad Bhagavatam Puranam Amalam Prema Pumarto Mahan Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Matamidam Tatradaro Naparam. What is the teaching of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur is the one who wrote this verse. He said, this is the teaching of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and I'm not interested in anybody else's opinion. So what is that teaching? Arajyo Bhagavan Brajesha Tanayas. My most worshipable deity, Arajyo Bhagavan, is Brajesha Tanayas, that is the son of Nanda Maharaj. And he's always living in Vrindavan. He never steps Taddama Vrindavanam. He never takes one step outside of Vrindavan. But we see that there's Dwarkadish Krishna, that there's Madhurai's Krishna. He said, he is not my worshipable deity. My worshipable deity is Brajesha Tanayas. I'm not the servant of that Krishna who predominates over Satyabhama and Rukmini and the other 16,000 queens. But I'm the servant of that Krishna in Vrindavan who is predominated over by the gopis. Ramya Karchit Upasanam Vrajabadu. The highest worship of the Lord is that which, and when I was hearing the verse from Srila Gurudev, I remembered Prabhupada talking about that verse, otherwise it never crossed my mind, and my mind didn't stay there for any length of time. But Prabhupada said, the highest worship of the Lord is that which was manufactured by the gopis, kalpita, those of you who speak Hindi. So it was manufactured by the gopis. And what is the evidence of this? The evidence is Srimad Bhagavatam. How? Krishna told the gopis after the Rasa dance and after Gopi Geet, when they were searching everywhere for him, and then he appeared to them, he said that even if I had the lifetime of Brahma, I have no capacity to repay you. Therefore, your own activities will have to be its own remuneration. And that just reminds me that once in New York, Prabhupada, again, as a father encourages his baby children, I did a painting of Radha and Krishna and the 8 gopis in Montreal. And then Prabhupada went to Montreal, and then he came back to New York. So Prabhupada called to me I was in the audience, and he said, that painting that you did of Radha and Krishna and the 8 gopis is so nice, I have no capacity to repay you. It was, again, to the little babies. So anyway, so Krishna said that to the gopis, and that's the real thing. He has no capacity to repay them. So Srimad Bhagavatam Amalam Puranam. The Srimad Bhagavatam is the spotless evidence of this. And Prema Pumarta Mahan. The ultimate goal of life is Braj Prem. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, I worship that Krishna, not who is the son of Devaki and Vasudeva. but that Krishna who is the son of Mother Yasoda. When Krishna appeared to Vasudeva and Devaki, as you know, he wasn't born, appeared as a full-grown youth, teenager, with wavy blackish blue hair and ornaments and a big crown and carrying the 4 symbols of Vishnu. But when he was born from the womb of Mother Yasoda, he went ka, 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 crying like a little baby. That's the Krishna that I worship, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said. So this is Gaura Vani. This is the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the fortunate jivas. Dasamul Shiksha of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is Gaura Vani. The last line of Dasamul Shiksha is, this is the teaching of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the fortunate jivas. And what is that teaching? Amnaya Praha. Those Vedic literatures that are coming down in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, these Vedic literatures are accepted as evidence. The evidence for what is the absolute truth. And what is that evidence that's accepted in that Amnaya, or the manifestation of evidence? One, Brajendranandan Shyam Sundar is the absolute truth. 2, he is the reservoir of all unlimited transcendental energies. And that reminded me of how, right from the beginning, Prabhupada was trying to explain that to us. Parasa Shakti Vivadvaiva Shriyate. That Krishna has unlimited energies, and it's broken down into 3, material, spiritual, and marginal. But they're unlimited energies. And he's controlling them so completely that they appear like they're working by themselves. So Prabhupada said, finger, come here, scratch my head. I remember back at 26 2nd Avenue. Finger, come here, scratch my head. It's coming so much under my control that it seems like it's just a mechanical process, but it's under control. So that same Krishna of Vrindavan is a source of unlimited energy, Shaktiman. And he's also simultaneously Rasabdim. He's the reservoir of all loving transcendental mellows. Number 5, the living entity. There are 2 kinds of living entities, the conditioned souls and the liberated souls. The conditioned souls are under the fetters of matter and Maya, and the liberated souls are free. So there's 2 kinds of souls. And this is also explained in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Prabhupada proves that the living entity never came from Goloka Vrindavan. If anybody thinks that the living entities came from Goloka Vrindavan, what's so bad about that? It's really bad. You know why? Because if we think that there's Maya there, that if we fell down from there, that means there's Maya there. That means we could never surrender everything and give up everything to go there, because there's Maya there. But Dhamna Svena Sada Nirastiku Akam Satyam Param Dhimahi. The very first verse of the very first canto, the very first chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam. I worship the Supreme Lord, who's forever residing in his own abode, which is forever free from illusion. So there's 2 kinds of living entities, the conditioned souls and the liberated souls. Both the living entities and the material nature, all these material universes, are simultaneously one and different from the Lord. The process to realize the perfection of life is called, the sadhana is called Shuddha Bhakti, pure Bhakti. Bhakti without any tinge of material desire, without any tinge of any desire other than to please Krishna. And Priti, or Prem, is the goal of attainment of that sadhana. So these, then, that was the 10, and at the bottom, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur writes, this is the teaching of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the fortunate souls. What else is Gaura Vani? Sri Shikshastakam, what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give that no other incarnation before or Acharya ever gave before, Charim Charat for a long time. Anarpita Charim Charat Kurunayavatirnam Kalo Samarpaitam Unat Ojvalasam Swabhakti Sriyam Hari Purita Sundaram Jitikadam Vasandi Pitaha Sada Hridaya Kundare Spuritava Sachinandana. When I was having a darshan, just myself and a couple of other people, with Srila Gurudev in 1992, and he said, this is why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came. He came to give Manjari Bhav, the service as a maidservant of Srimati Radhika. So I said to him, where does it say that? Because I never heard Prabhupada say that. So he immediately quoted that verse. So after the darshan, I went home. Home means to my room in Vrindavan. I was staying at that time at the Krishna Balaram Mandir guest house. And so I went to my Chaitanya Charitamrita and looked for that verse. And sure enough, Prabhupada was saying that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give the most highest, brilliant, and effulgent service in conjugal love. But I didn't know what that meant. But gradually we find out by the mercy of Prabhupada's representative, our Shiksha Guru. In that verse, Anarpita Charing Charat Karunayavatir Namkalo Samarpaitam Unat Ojvalarasam Swabhakti Sriyam. Sriyam, in Prabhupada's Chaitanya Charitamrita, he, in the word for word, he said Sriyam means treasure. And treasures are usually in chests, treasure chests. And treasure chests are usually locked. So, Srila Narayan Maharaj explained that Prabhupada's books, all of his books together, are just like a treasure chest. And I think most everybody in the room, because I see people who are here for the first time, but most everybody has opened up the treasure chest of Prabhupada's books. But the interesting thing about the treasure chest, and there are so many jewels in it, is that there's another treasure chest inside with even more valuable jewels. So the key to that locked treasure chest of Prabhupada's books is in the hands of the Mahabhagavad, because only a Mahabhagavad can understand another Mahabhagavad. So even though I'm Prabhupada's Diksha disciple for the last 40 years, because I'm not a Mahabhagavad, I can't understand fully Prabhupada's books without help. Yaha Bhagavatapada Vaishnavarastani. Prabhupada translates in the Anshalila of Chaitanya Charitamrita. Yes, you should read Srimad Bhagavatam, but if you want to read Srimad Bhagavatam, then you should go to the lotus feet of a pure devotee and hear from him how to read it. So again, Gurudev put for me and so many others a spotlight onto Prabhupada's books. So this is Gaura Vani. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give what no other incarnation or acharya came to give, anarpita, charim, unarpita, not giving, charim acharat, that means for a very long time. How long? For a day of Brahma. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, just like Krishna, comes once in a day of Brahma. So since Mahaprabhu came in the last day of Brahma, that's like over 300 trillion years, nobody gave that gift. So what is that gift? Samarpaitam unata ujvalarasam swabhakti. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came for two purposes. One purpose was to taste his own love. That means the love of Srimati Radhika, Krishna's love, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself. So he came to taste the love of Srimati Radhika, because even though he's God, he had three unfulfilled desires. And this is also explained in Adi Lila of Chaitanya Charitamrita. One, what is the nature of the love of Srimati Radhika, which drives me mad? I forget who I am, what I am, where I am. I become vifala. I just lose my sanity. I become like a mad person. And her prem is my guru. she is my guru of Krishna Prem, and just like Prabhupada taught us the Swami step, he taught us how to dance in 1966. So Krishna is saying, Radhika, who is my guru, she's taught me how to dance many novel dances. And it's not like my dancing, because my dance is, okay, first you put the right foot over the left foot, and the left foot over the right foot. And it's controlled. But his dancing is uncontrolled, just as a leaf is uncontrolled in the wind. The wind is the dancing teacher of the leaf. And the wind is making the leaf dance all over the place, out of its own control. So the first desire that Krishna could not fulfill as Krishna is, what is the nature of Radharani's love that drives me mad? And what is it about me that drives her mad that I cannot experience about my own self? Krishna is Atmaram, he takes pleasure in his own self. But I can't experience to the depth that she can the sweetness of my qualities, the sweetness of my pastimes, the sweetness of my flute playing, and the sweetness of my form. But she realizes this much more than me. And by that realization, her happiness is 10 million times greater than my happiness. So what is the nature of her happiness that I myself can't even experience? No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't experience it. So therefore, he had to borrow her mood and complexion and come as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in order to experience these things. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came for two reasons. One was to taste something, to taste what he couldn't taste as Krishna. Prema ras niryas kori te aswadan. He came to taste the essence of love of his greatest devotee. And raga marga bhakti loke kori te pracharan. And he came to give the path of spontaneous love, that is Raganuga Bhakti. Raga Marg, Marg means the path of Rag, meaning Rag Anuga. Anuga means following in the path. Raga Marga Bhakti Loke, Korite Pracharan. He came to preach that. And then Rasika Sekara Krishna Parama Karun, that most merciful Rasika Shekhar, the enjoyer, the taster of all the mellows of love, the highest taster of the mellows of love, Krishna, became Parama Karun. He became the most merciful by combining with Srimati Radhika. And for these two reasons, E Dui Hetu Hoite, for these two reasons Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came. So, Samarpayitam Unat Ojvala Rasam Swabhakti, he came to taste the love of Srimati Radhika, and Sriyam, he came to give Swabhakti Sriyam. Sriyam, that word that Prabhupada called the treasure, the lot treasure, means sobam, or beauty. The beauty of Srimati Radhika's love, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give to the fortunate jivas who have that as their swarup, as their constitutional position. And what is that? The service as a maidservant of Srimati Radhika. Srila Rupa Goswami, as you know, I think all of you know this prayer, Sri Chaitanya Manobhistyam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam. Srila Rupa Goswami, I offer myself, my obeisances to the lotus feet of Srila Rupa Goswami, who established the innermost desire, coming out from his innermost desire, what he wanted to taste and what he wanted to give. So Srila Rupa Goswami explains in his literatures that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to taste what's called the Kamatmika Bhakti of the gopis, headed by Srimati Radhika, in Sambhoga Atmika. That means having a direct relationship with Krishna, like Radhika or Lalita or Vishaka. And he came to give Tat Tat Bhava, each Chatmika, the love of the maidservants of Srimati Radhika, who don't have a direct relationship with Krishna, but who assist Radharani in her service to Krishna, and in return are nourished by experiencing what she experiences, both emotionally and physically. So you could call that, I guess, in this material world, it would be called a vicarious experience. Like if you're so much in love with somebody, like your baby, and your baby is crawling towards the edge of the stairway, and the next second, the baby's going to go down the stairway. So you see it just about to go, and because you love that baby so much, you feel like you're about to go down the stairs, that feeling of fear, and immediately, without thinking of anything else, you go to grab the baby to save the baby's life. So that is like something like vicarious. Or suppose two devotees are laughing together, and then a third devotee sees them laughing. They're sitting all three together, and two of them are talking about something, and they start laughing. So the third one sees them, and then he starts laughing. That's like a vicarious experience. So the maidservants of Srimati Radhika have that vicarious experience, but because it's not a material experience, it's spiritual, it's happening to the soul, and it's a real experience. It's not like I go to the movies and I see the husband leaving the wife and I feel like I've been left. You know that? And I identify with somebody in the movie and I go through all their emotions. But these emotions are not me. Even this body is not me. But the vicarious experience in the spiritual world is reality. So, Anarpita Chiring Sharat Karunayava Kirnam Kalo, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give what no other incarnation or acharya gave before, since Mahaprabhu came. That is the brilliantly effulgent, highest possible relationship with Krishna, which is as a maidservant of Srimati Radhika. And therefore, may that Lord, who is resplendent like molten gold, that is Krishna covered by the complexion of Srimati Radhika, ever reside in the innermost chambers of your heart, is the blessing of Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami and Srila Rupa Goswami. So that is also Gaura Vani. And Sri Shikshastakam is Gaura Vani. You may wonder, how is it Gaura Vani? Because before Mahaprabhu, for example, the second verse of Shikshastakam, Nam Namakari Bahuda Nijasarava Shaktis Tatrati Dani Amatak Smarane Nakala Etadrasi Tava Kripa Bhagavan Mamapi Durdoiva Midrasamiha Janina Nuraga. That, O Lord, you've invested all of your transcendental energies in your holy names. And you have hundreds of millions of names, like Krishna and Govinda, etc. In these holy names, you've invested all your transcendental energies, and there's no hard and fast rules of chanting the holy name. But even though this is the case, I'm so unfortunate, Durdoiva, I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for the name. So you may say, well, other people before Mahaprabhu gave the holy names, like Ram gave his name, and Prahlad was chanting the holy names. So many incarnations, so many devotees were chanting the Lord's names and the Lord's glories before Mahaprabhu. So why is Shikshastakam the special Gaura Vani, the special donation of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Because in your holy names you've invested all of your transcendental energies. But according to the name, that's how much energy it has. For example, Lord Jagannath is a secondary name of Krishna, of God. Secondary because it's not really a name. It's like a position. And a position in Jagannath means he's the Lord of the universe. If I call you a temple president or an institutional manager, that's not your name. So Jagannath means Lord of the universe. And plus, it's in relation to, it's a name, but it's a secondary name. Plus, it's in relation to this world, Jagat, this world, Na. So it's in relation to me and my body and how he takes care of me and helps me during the day, and I depend on him that things will happen. And by Krishna's mercy, I got a raise in my job. It's all in relation to me and my body. And the weather was nice by the Lord's mercy. So that name has less power than his personal name, like Krishna, Govinda, Nrsinga. But of all the primary names, which means his personal names, some names have more power than other names, because some forms are plenary portions. I was just reading a few days ago, because we gave a talk at a Ayurvedic college, was that? Natural, what? Wellpark College, which is a college of alternative medicine. So before the class, I was looking in Prabhupada's database, which has all of his books in it. I was looking under Ayurveda. So Prabhupada was talking about Dhanvantari, who brought the science of medicine to this world. And Prabhupada explained that he's a plenary portion of a plenary portion of Krishna. That means he's not the full thing. He's a portion, though a fuller portion than a part of a plenary portion. Like, for example, Mahavishnu is a part, a kala of a kala of a kala of a kala of a kala. He's 5 times removed. Goes from Krishna to Balaram to Mul Sankarshan to Mahasankarshan to Mahavishnu. Expansion of the expansion of the expansion. So, according to the completeness of the form, then the name is also that much powerful. Like in the first canto, Prabhupada writes in one purport that 1,000 Vishnu names equal one Ram name, and 3 Ram names equal 1 Krishna name. So then similarly, even within Vrindavan, the names of Vrindavan are the highest. That's the most complete form, and all other forms come from that. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is telling Sri Sanatana Goswami that the Advaya Gyan Paratattva, the one without a second absolute truth, is Krishna with a peacock feather and flute, the son of Nanda Maharaj. And the other features of Krishna are his expansions, like Vasudeva Krishna, Matharesh Krishna. So, according to the form, the name has power. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give, and whenever I would hear something from Srila Gurudev, it always reminded me of the seed that Prabhupada gave of that when I first met him in the 60s. Back in 26 2nd Avenue in 1966, Prabhupada said that same thing. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give what no one gave before. When Lord Jesus came, Prabhupada is saying, he came to teach that God is your father. So what is the relationship between a father and a child? Give me, give me, give me, give me. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught that you can become the father of God. And then there's the service attitude, that if I don't feed, like Mother Yasoda, if I don't feed Krishna, he'll die. And then Prabhupada said, and Mahaprabhu gave even a higher relationship, which is relationship in conjugal love. So right from the beginning, Prabhupada was giving seeds of this, which later on became in his books, and later on we learned much more about. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was teaching that you should chant Radhakant, Gopinath, Gopinatha Padakamalayo, Gopi Vartu Padakamalayo, Dasa Dasano Dasa, Naham Vipru, Nacha Naramati, Napi Vaisho Nasudro. I'm not a Brahmin, I'm not a Kshatriya, I'm not a Vaishya, I'm not a Sudra. Naham Varni, I'm not a Brahmachari. Nacha Grihapati, I'm not a Grihastha. Navanasto, I'm not a Vanaprastha. And Jatirva, I'm not a sannyasi. Then what am I? I am the servant of the servant of the servant, of he who is the reservoir of unlimited bliss, the ocean of bliss, who is the Gopi Bhartu Padakamalayo. Dasa Dasanudasa. I am that servant of that Krishna who is, in the general translation, first we have to learn the general translation, then we learn the deeper meanings from our acharyas in their commentaries. And so Bhartur means husband in a general sense, or master. But if you know Sanskrit, depending on the sandhyas and combinations and intentions, it means different things. So the real meaning of Gopi Bhartur is he whose Bhartur, he whose master is the gopis. Krishna is the servant of the gopis, particularly Srimati Radhika, and that's his favorite essence that he wants to taste. And this is the original form of God as the servant of Srimati Radhika, and all other forms of Krishna are expansions. What am I talking about? Where'd you get this information from anyway? It's right there in the first canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, first verse, first chapter. And Srila Prabhupada quotes Srila Viswanath Chakrabarti Thakur's commentary, Janmadhyasya yato. Janmadhyasya means Adi Ras. And the Adi Ras, or the original Ras, or relationship, is conjugal Ras. And all other Rasas come from that. And all other Rasas, by nourishing the origin, like if you water the root of a tree, then all the leaves and branches are watered. So, by serving conjugal Ras, all the other Rasas are automatically nourished. What's an example? The cows take Krishna out cow herding during the day. And why? Because in Krishna's house he can't meet with the gopis. So he needs an excuse to go out, and the cows provide that excuse. And so Krishna loves the cows so much that he personally milks the cows, he embraces the cows, he scratches the necks of the cows. The calves he puts on his lap and massages them. So in this way, Adi Yasya Daha means Adi Ras, or the conjugal mellow. So in the Shikshastakam, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave what no other incarnation gave. This is his special donation. And Trinadapi Sunichena. What do you mean this was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's special gift? He wasn't the only humble devotee. Look how humble Prahlad is. His father tried to kill him, and Prahlad was always like this, always very respectful. And Dhruva Maharaj was respectful. Haridas Thakur is so humble. Of course, he came in Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time. But all devotees, all pure devotees are humble. Prithu Maharaj is humble. Prabhupada describes in his translation of the fourth canto that even though Prithu Maharaj was the king of the whole earth and he had so many good qualities, he was very humble. A person who doesn't have good qualities, he's very proud of himself. And he's just like a tree that doesn't have any fruits or flowers. So he stands up very straight, no weight. But a person who's full with good qualities, good devotional qualities, he's hanging down very low because he's by the weight of his fruits and flowers of his good qualities. So Prithu Maharaj was humble. So what was the special donation that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give? Nobody could give that humility that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give. The humility of the Vrijabasis, like the highest one being Srimati Radhika, who prayed that if I know that Krishna loves another gopi more than me, but she's angry at him, this is described also by Prabhupada in the Anchalila, then I would go to her house, take her hand, and bring her to Krishna. Because if Krishna's happiness is to make me unhappy, logic. If Krishna gets his happiness, thank you, by making me unhappy, then if my unhappiness is is giving Krishna happiness, then is giving a new gift to the world. Even the Rath Yatra festival. I think most of you have read the Rath Yatra festival in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, particularly around Rath Yatra time. So before Mahaprabhu came, the Rath Yatra festival was going on for many, many thousands of years. In fact, ever since Lord Jagannath's appearance, in previous ages, when King Indradumna, you know the story that some carpenter carpentered the big log that came in the ocean, and the three deities and Sudarshan Chakra came. So since that very time, Lord Jagannath instructed King Indradumna to have this festival, the Chandan Yatra festival and all the festivals of Rath Yatra. So it's coming down from a very long time, of millions of years. But when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came, he gave a new light to the festival. And what was that? Jagannath Puri represents Dwarka. The Jagannath temple represents Dwarka. And the Gambhira temple, where Jagannath goes on his, what do you call it? Journey, is Vrindavan. So Dwarkadish Krishna is really Krishna from Vrindavan, who left Vrindavan in order to, it's a very long story, but in a nutshell, he left Vrindavan thinking that the gopis are feeling so much separation from me even when I'm right there. And when I'm not there, they're thinking that I am there. That's the nature of the madness of praying. So if I go away forever, then they'll always be happy. But it didn't work like that. Their unhappiness increased. So Dwarkadish Krishna is always pining for Vrindavan, for the Brijvasis, and particularly for Srimati Radhika. So once a year, when the separation becomes too great, then he tells his consort, Bimala, who is the consort of Lord Jagannath, that now I have loose motions, and I need a change of atmosphere. I need a change of scenery for a while to get my health better, and then I'll come back. So that is the that bathing ceremony when the Lord gets sick. And so he went with Balaram and Subhadra, just so his queen wouldn't have any trepidation that where is Krishna going? Is he going to the gopis? She knew that if he's with Balaram and Subhadra, they'll certainly bring him back. But Balaram and Subhadra stayed at the house of Nanda Baba, talking and sharing with the Brajavasis like Mother Yasoda, and Krishna went to the kunjas with the gopis. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave a new light to the Rath Yatra festival. And it was at that Rath Yatra festival that he manifested the mood of Srimati Radhika in Kurukshetra, meeting Krishna at Kurukshetra, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was calling Jagannath to come back to Vrindavan. And that's a whole 5 classes in itself. So this is the gift that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to give. Raganuga Bhakti coming to Ragatmika Bhakti. And the process of that is taking shelter of the pure devotee who can gradually train us to develop that spontaneous love. Srila Narayan Maharaj explained that Srila Prabhupada, because he's in the line of Srila Rupa Goswami, he gave Vaidhi Bhakti, but he didn't come to give Vaidhi Bhakti. He had to give Vaidhi Bhakti because without Vaidhi Bhakti as a strong platform, no one can come to Raganuga Bhakti. But his goal was to give Raganuga Bhakti and ultimately Ragatmika Bhakti, which is the love of the residents of Vrindavan. I have a few more things to say about Srila Prabhupada that is very, very deep and interesting. But I'm going to break for a minute, a commercial break, to ask if anybody has any questions or doubts or something that's disturbing about perhaps what I'm saying because it's new and different from other things that you might have heard. So if you'd like to share any doubts, I'd love to hear doubts. And don't be shy, because if you ask it, the other person will be happy that you asked it and they didn't have to ask it.
Just wondering, you were talking about the pastimes of Srila Prabhupada. At the present, when you were in the present of his presence, how did you feel about him at that particular time? Like, you talk of such greatness now, but at the time, how did you see him? What was were you kind of like, this is just a spiritual being, or were you just like, this is a man from India, or how was your feeling?
Very nice question. Well, the very first moment that I saw him, when I was a drugged out hippie in Tompkins Square Park, as I think I mentioned that, I said to myself, he looks like a genie who floated in on a magic carpet. I couldn't think of great devotee because I didn't know what a great devotee was, but I knew he was something not from this world. And I thought, what is this singing? It sounds like it's coming from another planet. Then I remember in 1972 or so, when he was visiting our Brooklyn, New York temple, and then I came in to ask him a question and to give him a rose. And then, as I was giving him the rose, my first thought was, wow, I'm the most fortunate person. Here I am with him alone here. But then I thought, no, actually, he's with all living entities. He's giving his mercy to all living entities. Even though we were completely unqualified to think anything, by his mercy, he gave us those good thoughts. And that's why I made a big, big blunder. Because I knew he was transcendental. That's why I didn't go to Vrindavan, even though we were getting reports that Prabhupada may leave the world soon. I was thinking, he'll never leave, he's transcendental. Sure, he's transcendental, but that doesn't mean he's not going to leave when he wants to, when Krishna's calling him to go. But I did know, but I know a million times more now. But I did know. We did know, at least in word. The one thing that I didn't know was that I thought, from the way he was speaking, that the spiritual master accepts the offenses of accepts the karma, takes the karma, suffers the karma of his disciple, because he would say things like that. That because my devotees didn't keep their vows and they're committing sinful activities, that's why I'm sick now. And I believed it, but I didn't know he was a trickster, transcendental. Because he was just saying that, just because we didn't care about Krishna, we're too neophyte, but at least we cared about him, and we thought, better not do anything wrong, because then he'll get sick. And I thought this way, that he accepted the karma, all the way up till I met Gurudev in the 90s. But then he very carefully explained that it doesn't happen. He takes the karma and burns it, just like a big fire. No matter how much garbage you throw in the big fire gets bigger because it uses it as fuel, and the garbage just burns to ashes. So then I thought, but wait a minute, he's saying that, but I remember in the Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers, Prabhupada said that he does suffer the karma of his disciples. I thought, but I know that Shiksha Guru and Diksha Guru are one, and I have faith in Srila Narayan Maharaj as my Shiksha Guru. But I do remember Prabhupada saying that, so I went to the book, back to the book, and wow, I had it all wrong. Because I think many of you have read the book Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers. So the Peace Corps worker, Bob Cohen, is asking Prabhupada, do you get sick? And Prabhupada said, yes. He said, is that because of your karma? And he said, yes, because of my karma. And then Bob says, well, I thought the pure devotee doesn't have any karma. And Prabhupada said, yes, the pure devotee doesn't have any karma, but I'm not a pure devotee. So then Bob said, well, you're the best devotee. So Prabhupada said, no, I don't think I'm a devotee, you're the best devotee. And then he's asking about the disciples. Did you get sick from your disciples? He said, yes, because Krishna is a big fire, and he doesn't take any reactions, he just burns it. But I'm like a small fire, so I have to get affected. And then Bob indicated something that, oh, you must be humble. You must be just being humble. So Prabhupada said, just like Srimati Radhika, she thinks that she has no qualifications, and if she's ever able to meet Krishna, it's only by the mercy of her friends. And this is the nature of the pure devotees, that they're very humble. So in this way, he was in a roundabout way saying that he neither has his own karma, nor does he suffer the karma of his devotees, but he takes that karma and burns it.
I just want to say we have to be somewhere.
Okay, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. Vasanti will take your email address so that we can send you more information about when we're having the programs, and so you can get the beautiful lectures of our Gurudev on your email. Huh? Okay. All right. Any other questions? Does that answer it?
Yeah, it's great.
Okay. So because it's Prashadam in a couple of minutes, I just want to tell one more story about the depths of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Gurudev was explaining that Prabhupada not only that he didn't come just to give Bhakti Bhakti, but his real ultimate intention was to give Raganuga Bhakti. But he didn't only come to give Raganuga Bhakti, but he came to give Rupanuga Bhakti, which is a special kind of Raganuga Bhakti, which those who are pure followers of Srila Rupa Goswami have. All the acharyas in the line of Srila Rupa Goswami are all Rupanuga acharyas. You probably heard Prabhupada said we're all in the line of Rupanuga. That means that they all have this particular relationship with Srimati Radhika as maidservant, and they're all under the guidance of Srila Rupa Goswami in his feature as Rupa Manjari in the spiritual world. So all Rupanuga devotees are Raganuga, but not all Raganuga devotees are Rupanuga. Raganuga may mean Krishna's mother, Krishna's friend, Krishna's servant in Vrindavan, but the particular service as a maidservant of Srimati Radhika is Rupanuga. So everything that Prabhupada did, Hare Krishna, thank you. Did he get a book? Can you make sure he has a book? Okay, so Srila Gurudev said that Prabhupada is just like a mountain, because the mountain is very high and anybody can see the height of the mountain. But the mountain is also deep underground, and it's very difficult to see that. So Prabhupada established so many temples and gurukulas and farms, and he made hundreds of thousands of devotees and congregation members. That's the height of the mountain. But the depth of the mountain, that he's actually a Rupanuga devotee, and he came to give that, that's why he's collecting us. That depth we have to learn from the Shiksha Guru, who he really is. And he said that when Prabhupada was just leaving the world, Prabhupada called him over to his bedside and put his hand in his own hand and began weeping and said, now I want you to take over my mission, continue my mission and take care of my disciples and followers. And also give me samadhi, which is a very honored position. When the Guru tells his disciple, Gurudev is Prabhupada's disciple, but his Shiksha disciple. Just like Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is the Shiksha disciple of Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj. And many of our predecessor gurus are Shiksha disciples of the previous Guru. So in this way the disciplic succession is going on as a Shiksha Diksha line. So Srila Narayan Maharaj is my senior most godbrother and Shiksha Guru. So we're all very fortunate that he's coming in the first week of January. So I hope you'll all be able to take the opportunity of meeting with him and experiencing full Prabhupada through him. So just an announcement, anybody who's not on the Harikatha mailing list and would like to be, you can give your name to Vasanti, and then you automatically get movies, free movies and lectures and transcriptions of Srila Gurudev's lectures in your email every few days. And also we have posters of the paintings that I did under Srila Gurudev's direction. Where's Vasanti? Most of you have seen them, but she'll show them after the program. And any other announcement? Okay, now it's time for Prashadam. Okay, any last question though? Otherwise we can meet individually after.
Maybe
Yes.
about the class tomorrow, the program tomorrow.
Oh yeah, the Thessalonian.
Oh yeah, tomorrow morning.
No, I mean the 4 o'clock at.
4 o'clock. Can you announce it?
Trevor,
I don't know where or when it is.
it's at the yoga ashram in
Ashram
Parnell.
Yoga.
Yeah.
And Parnell.
At 12 o'clock, Syamarani Didi will be at the festival in India at Altia Square in the city. She'll be there for 2 or 3 hours and speaking on the stage and talking to any interested comers. And after that, at 4 o'clock, 4 p.m., at 24 Cheshire Street, Parnell, which is the Ashram Yoga Centre, she will be giving a program there. We can all gather there and there'll be a program similar to this evening.
Gaura Premanandi, Hari Hari. We have time for 1 minute.
Follow. Chalo. Follow.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Hare
Vaishnava Sarvam Shudhanata Pravjama Shudhanata Varkijay Rup Sanatan Bhadaruna Shidhi Gopala Bhadatazarina Saksa Sami Prabhukijay Mexico Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadara Shri Go Bhaktivinoda Kijay Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gop Gopigo Govardhan Dwara Samananda Shri Bhaktivinoda Lukam Kijay Shri Harinam Sankirtan Kijay Swagat Bhaktivinoda Kijay Govinda Mahaprashari Govinde
Both